I have seldom been in the presence of people that struck me dumb and that were so overwhelmingly intelligent, evocative, literate, and loquacious that I didn't want to say anything because their intellect was so far superior to mine that, it's the old thing, even a fool shines until he opens his mouth. I didn't want to talk around these people. I'll tell you who they were. You can count them on one hand. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I didn't want to say too much around him. I talked to him a little bit, but mostly that was, yes, Prabhupada. And I had the same kind of reaction on a totally different end of the spectrum of human endeavor with Vivian Stanshall, the headmaster of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, who I'm not sure, it pretty much generational, that band is, people are still aware of it or they're gaining new fans. I don't think so much, but they were a comedic band. Comedic that's puts them in a box that's inappropriate. It's comedic plus insanity plus acid-inspired lunacy plus incredible English schoolboy literacy. Go listen to the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. But more importantly, go listen to the individual works of Vivian Stanshall. I became friends with that group long after they disbanded in the 80s, 83 actually it was. And I was very friendly with Legs Larry Smith, the drummer for the band. And he was house sitting for John Lord from Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water guys, in Hambleton, Oxfordshire. And John had bought the house but had not yet moved in. And they needed Larry and ultimately me. They they let me live there in exchange for looking after the place as a caretaker, like Jack Torrance in The Shining. So I was staying there at Uden Lodge, the name of that beautiful big mansion, just down the road from George Harrison's. He stopped by, yes, and I'm sure I must have said something to that, about that uncomfortable encounter with George and particularly Olivia Harrison in the winter of 1983 when they came over to see Larry, but he was out and only I was there. And so I sat with George for about an hour. And his lovely wife, not. And but I was there, it's kind of the rock star belt of Oxfordshire, and people would come over like Alvin Lee, which you'll remember from the Woodstock movie. I'm going home, play that fast guitar, or those clogs, first person I ever saw in clogs. And who else? All of Deep Purple, Sam Brown, lots of guys that had been around in the 60s and were still around, had settled there in Oxford. Barrymore Barlow, the drummer from Jethro Tull, and they're all, they all had big, very nice houses. Seemed as though they did very well for themselves. And I was a guy who had nothing. But I had moved in there, and through that time of living there in England, at John Lord's house, I got to meet Vivian Stanshall at his home, the Lighthouse, which was an old World War II gunnery boat that was parked in one of those, docked rather, in one of those of the many canals in England. I can't think of where it was, not important. Anyway, it had been purchased from Denny Lane for £3,000 by Vivian. Now, who was Vivian Stanshall? Well, obviously I told you that Vivian Stanshall was like so goddamn smart that I didn't want to say too much around him because I looked like an absolute idiot. He was so much more educated than I, spoke several languages, and was mad as a hatter and a genius creative artist. Every just radiated creativity in a way that I never could. He was like a 100-watt bulb to my sort of 5-watt flickering something. So I learned a lot from him. And I became friends with Viv, which he didn't like to be called, but everybody did, and was kind of friendly with him. Friendly, yeah. Even when I went back to Canada, he would write and stuff. So yeah, I would say I was friends with Vivian. I don't like to overstate about my relationship with any of these people. But my wife interviewed him just a few days before. He burned up in his bed from drinking alcohol and lighting a cigarette, nodding off, and his beard caught on fire. And it's not funny, is it? Horrible, and he was nothing there. It was spontaneous human combustion with the help of alcohol and ciggies. So, it's very difficult to say too much about Vivian because he was like a one-man species. Other one-man species, Jack Webb, just the facts, ma'am, from Dragnet. Ed Sullivan. Like sometimes you see these guys and there's only one of them. Many people are sort of derivative of everybody else or many other people, but this guy was an original. And there is a small select group of, at any given moment of time, that are truly original. And I've been around a few. Vivian was just the most amazing man. His wife and child came to my home in Lockport, and we were working on a book which never came to fruition. And after spending a lot of time working on the book with my partner, Stephen Galbraith, who's a really wonderful person and a very, very successful archivist and head librarian in library studies in Rochester, New York, at one of the universities. I'm sorry, Steve, I've forgotten the name. Eludes me at the moment, as so much does when you get to be this age, hard to retain. So Steve really wrote this book a lot and did a lot of really great stuff. I must give all credit to Steve, really, for this book. Anyway, in between knowing and interviewing Vivian up until a few days before he died many times, all of the Bonzo Dog Band, John Lord, Vivian's brother, Vivian's mother, his wife, his children, everybody. I mean, we did just crazy research on that, and then bringing them back the tapes to Lockport and making them all into transcripts, and then taking the transcripts and putting the quotes. His brother, I remember, and into the narrative, writing on the book was huge task, and the book has never been published. Although the manuscript is finished but unedited, so I just took the bull by the horns because I was tired of this. Would be another one of the few unpublished works that I have. And I did an audiobook of that, which you can buy. It's called Dear Boy, The Resurrection of Vivian Stanshall, which you can find right now, me reading it anywhere online for download. But we want to print these books, which is kind of the purpose of this series of rants that we're doing here about the kind of loose ends of the books I've written that I haven't really talked about. But yeah, again, in 2024, I've got to get that book out. Now, Vivian Stanshall is an acquired tastes. He's not for the masses. He's for an aware, intellectually precarious audience that likes, I don't want to say Monty Python because it's not exactly that. It's more than that. But if to describe it to you so you understand the kind of humor and the kind of wave of thought an expression that he was on, I can say Monty Python, just so you'll know, in the same way that I could say football when I wanted to talk about baseball. Not exactly the same thing, but it lets you know kind of what I'm talking about. So Dear Boy, The Resurrection of Vivian Stanshall won't find a wide audience of readers, but I think it'll find the right ones. It's an important book, largely written and slaved over and suffered for by my friend Steve Goldbreath. So we hope to bring that to you very soon.